So in the original article, or the original edition of Biblical Archaeology Review, the guy who actually writes the article about this bone box is a guy named Andre Lemaire. And Andre Lemaire is a noted scholar from the Sorbonne, expert on ancient writing, especially ancient Hebrew writing. So they brought, when this first emerged on the market, they brought it to him. And they said, is this a legitimate inscription? And he looked at the inscription, and he did a lot of study on it, and he said, yes, this looks like a legitimate description. He did note that the part about brother Jesus looked like it was in a slightly different hand than the first part, like maybe it had been added on later. But he said the differences were no different than if you start writing a long letter. The way your text will look at the beginning of the letter is going to be a little different than by the time you get to the end of the letter. So he wasn't especially disturbed by that. And he said somebody might have put the original inscription in, James, son of Joseph, and then they thought, well, I better go back and add that this is the James, not just any James. So he said this was a legitimate inscription, and he wrote the article in Biblical Archaeology Review that said so. This sets off a firestorm of controversy. And some strange things happens along the way. One of the strange things that happens along the way is this bone box gets shipped to Canada, to Ontario, for display in a museum. And in transit, it breaks. So here you have what may be the most important archaeological artifact of proving that Jesus actually exists. And I guess the guys back in the shipping room in Jerusalem, oh, we don't have to, no, don't put too much bubble wrap around it. Bubble wrap costs money, And so it actually breaks on its way to Ontario. So you can imagine the curator in Ontario opening this box and seeing this crack running through it. He was probably horrified. And to make it worse, guess where the crack runs right through? Right through the middle of the inscription. So all kinds of strange things happen. This box came on the marketplace. It was actually 25 years ago. The guy who bought this box bought it 25 years ago. And there were no bones in it at the time. And then he just kind of stored it. He thought, well, that's cool. I have this bone box from ancient Israel, and he thought that was cool. This did not come from an archaeological dig. This came from the marketplace in antiquities, which is aside from archaeology. We'll put this as tenderly as possible.
Indiana Jones territory.
Which is true. Actually, he references that a couple times where somebody, I think it was it the fourth one, where somebody said, well, you're an archaeologist, you go on these expeditions looking for artifacts, and well, yeah, I do. And so you have this whole issue that archaeologists like to dig stuff up in sight, so there's all kinds of information about it that you can find out from the site. They want to know what the context was, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This did not come from an archaeological dig. This came from somebody got it somewhere, they sold it to somebody else, they sold it to somebody else. Pardon?
Bought it on eBay.
In modern terms, they could have bought it on eBay. So that's the first thing, especially, now think about it, the Israeli Antiquities Authority. Do you think they are in favor of this third-party marketplace where artifacts are sold? No, of course, they're totally against it. So their knee-jerk reaction, I'm not saying it's wrong, but their knee-jerk reaction is if something is sold in that marketplace, it's a forgery. And there have been all kinds of forgeries. No one is arguing that. But this is the problem with the bone box. It was not found in an official archaeological dig. So that's the next controversial part. And that's what makes some people lean toward the idea that at least the last part of the inscription is a forgery. So they focused in on the brother of Jesus part. And so this really becomes the battleground. Because Lemaire himself said that, well, it does seem to be in a slightly different hand, but he wasn't bothered by that, and we'll talk about why he wasn't bothered by that. So, if you look at the first part, the James bar Joseph, James son of Joseph. It's kind of a very angular and crisp, it's Aramaic actually, I think I've said Hebrew. It's very angular, well cornered, etc. The other part, the brother of Jesus, is not that way. It's kind of a little more free form. It's not as precise. So there is differences in the text. But then the next question becomes, is there patina? Is there an ancient patina in the letters? Because if you don't find something, digging in the ground, but by the way, archaeological sites have been seeded with artifacts also, and so that they are found when somebody digs for them. So that has happened. But if you don't know where this was found, you don't have any information on the context, are there ways to prove its authenticity one way or the other? So when they originally got the box, they looked at some of the dirt that was on the box, and they were able to test it. And yes, this is dirt from the area, Jerusalem. Is this box, would it date back to the time period we're talking about? And as we already mentioned, tests on the box and the type of lettering used in the first part of the engraving. Everybody agreed 63 AD is a legitimate date. So nobody was really arguing about that. So it all comes down to this last part of the inscription, and whether or not the last part of the inscription was a forgery added maybe hundreds of years later. So how can you tell? Well, one way is there's something known as a patina. And the idea behind a patina, let's say I write something. Let's say one of our fine youth wrote this, and then we lay it on a table and just keep it there for 2,000 years. Nobody touches it. Generations come and go at Mars Hill Presbyterian Church, but everybody knows, leave the, what do you think that is?
Butterfly.
Okay, leave the drawing of the butterfly on the table, and they do for 2,000 years. So 2,000 years go by, there's going to be a layer of, well, crud, right?
And oxidation.
Dust.
That's right. It's oxidation that they're looking
Oxidation, condensation. So there's going to be a layer of stuff on this. So if after 2,000 years, they find this work of art by one of our youth of the butterfly, and they want to see whether it's authentic or not. Well, if it looks like it does right now, they're going to question whether it's authentic, right? Because after 2,000 years, it should have oxidation and condensation, dust, et cetera, covered. Well, it's the same with the idea of the patina in the engraving. So the patina is something that after 2,000 years is kind of like, I'll use the technical term that I used earlier, crud, that builds up in the letters over a 2,000-year period. So Andre Lemaire from the Sorbonne, he said, well, yeah, there's patina, the same kind of patina in the whole inscription. So the fact that this looked like it was possible it might have been added slightly later, he didn't think that was a big deal because it was all equally old. It was all 2,000 years old. Now, if this part had been added in the Middle Ages, all kinds of klaxons and alarm bells would be going off, that some monk someplace added this on. But no, he found the patina, he tested on it, everything's cool. Well, the Israeli Antiquities Department believed that there was no patina in this, but there was a patina in this. So therefore, they announced to the world that this was a forgery.